Thank you, Madam VP. Principal, let me begin by thanking you for inviting me over. In such a short notice, you may able to get the numbers here that demonstrates the interest our key stakeholders are having on the reforms in education. The head of the Secretariat of the Council of Pacific Education, Mr. Govind Singh, thank you for coming. And I'm joined here by my senior colleagues from the ministry, directors mentioned by the principal, the heads of schools, teachers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. The night is not very welcoming to come out after a hard day's work that you've done, but still you come here demonstrates your commitment and how passionate you are about where we are going. What I intend to do, as the principal has said, this is a Talanoa session. I want to keep it that way, but to kickstart Talanoa, I probably will talk for about 20 to 25 minutes on what do you mean by knowledge-based society, why knowledge-based society, whereas government, the Ministry of Education's vision of having a quality education for change, peace and progress dovetails factors into that broader vision of government, and then the reforms that we're undertaking, and we talk about various stakeholders, the students, the staff, the teachers, heads of schools, management, some of the issues that we are confronting with and how we intend to deal with these issues. So that's the brief outline of the presentation for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard a number of times, the Prime Minister has been saying about the quest for the government, the current government, the Bainimarama government, the Bainimarama-led Fiji First Party government, to deliver a knowledge-based society. It is well established in literature, if you look at development literature, development economic literature, that building a solid human resource, human capital, initially development literature talked about financial capital, land labor, as the three key major factors of production or factors of economic growth and development. Over time, that factors of production extended to look at cultural capital, and human capital played a very important role. And it's well established in development literature that human capital development remains at the forefront of the growth and development agenda of a lot of countries. And a lot of developed countries have followed the trajectory who have invested heavily on human capital. If you visit China, those who have visited China, you would have noticed how China actually have invested heavily on human resource. You will find all kinds of research institutes, apart from universities, which has been established over the last 2 decades, which is responsible for such a rapid, widespread and deep growth of China's economy. And it is well established now that for a sustained growth of any country, for a sustained approach to developing the living standards of people, you need to invest on the human capital. Now, in Fiji's scenario is no exception. Fiji has also realized that we need to invest in our human capital, our people. It is our people who will contribute towards development of all sectors of the economy. But Fiji's scenario is slightly more different in terms of it gives more impetus to growth and development of the human resource, because over the last 3 decades, you will see the number of crises that the Fijian economy, Fiji country has gone through, has questioned ourselves in the forefront of the education sector. Where have we gone wrong? People whom we offered degrees out of universities who were holding hostages to our parliamentarians 52 days in 2000. Those, quite a number of them were degree holders. You see writers in dailies about crimes. You hear radio news. You see clips on TV about educated people engaging in unprofessional, unethical behavior. You question, what is the issue? A large proportion of the crime are committed by those who are not educated. So it is now taken for granted that to minimize social problems, to raise or accelerate growth and development, you need to educate the economy. So that people rise above variables of ethnicity, rise above issues of religion, gender, class status in the society, and makes decisions based on logic, reasoning, and scientific research. In a country where resources are scarce, alternatives or demands are numerous, we must make decisions based on logic, reasoning, and solid scientific basis. How do we get there? We get there if we are able to educate our people, at least through the formal education system. Developing a wisdom in a society, developing a knowledge-based society is contributed towards various means, through both formal as well as informal institutions. Faith-based groups, religious bodies play a very important role in building the collective wisdom that we want in the society. However, we are entrusted with our most important ministry in education in this country, which is the education ministry, where we are in control of over 170 high schools, over 700 primary schools. Honorable, welcome. Honorable Balwinder Singh. Thank you for coming. We are in control of over 700 high schools, control of over 170 high schools, over 700 primary schools, 3 universities, a number of other research institutions, including technical and vocational institutions. We have a very important role. We are in custody of children in shaping their destiny, in shaping their mind, in shaping their intellectual ability to make decisions based on logic, reasoning, and scientific basis, having a scientific basis. When you look at a class 1 children, or your kindergarten children, or class 2 children, you see the purity in them. You see the innocence. If the same child, at that age, the child doesn't know the difference between ethnicity, difference between religion, or differentiate individuals based on class or caste system. If the same child, at the age of 21, 25, 30, starts discriminating people based on ethnicity, religion, caste or class system, then you wonder, where did the child flip? At what stage did the child started to recognize that different ethnic groups are different and have different access, should have different access to resources, or different religious people holding different religious beliefs should have access to different resources in different ways. Where did it go wrong? It went wrong in the school system. Somewhere in the school system, we did not do what we were supposed to do. Ladies and gentlemen, the responsibility that we have is enormous. I tell my colleagues that we have the responsibility of shaping the future of this country, to shaping the young minds. The past is something that we can't change, but we can change the future. The past is something we can learn from and prepare for the future. And that's exactly what we wanted to do in the ministry. We want to learn from the past. We don't want to dwell in the past. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. And that's what we are trying to do, and that's what we are planning to do, and that's what we have started to do. Last year in November, myself and my senior colleagues, we wanted to see what's the situation with respect to the quality of products that we are producing. Our vision, the ministry has, is quality education for peace, change and progress. We convened an industry forum in October between the training providers and the industry, those who will be taking graduates, both from high schools as well from USP. We found numerous issues raised by the industry people with regard to the deficiencies in our graduates from high school as well as from universities. Issues of literacy, numeracy, ethical conduct, unprofessional conduct, graduates out of the universities. Despite universities making compulsory ethics unit in the certificate, diploma and degree program, despite the ministry having values education, despite us having family life subject. We then looked at our own performance of students in year 12 and year 13. The results were shocking. For year 13, just for a couple of subjects, mathematics pass rate last year was 15.5%. Of the entire students in this country who set for year 13 mathematics, only 15.5% passed, original raw score. Of the entire students who set for biology last year, only 14.2% of the students passed. Of all students who set for biology exam. Of all students who set for chemistry exam last year, year 13, 10.4% of the students passed. Of all students who set for physics exam last year, 28% of the students passed. The trend actually has been declining, the pass rate, the raw data. We then said to ourselves, something is wrong somewhere. Now, the issue was not about the blame game. The issue is about, one, identifying where the gaps are, identifying where the problems are, so that we can fix it and raise the bar. Raise the quality of graduates that we are producing out of primary school, out of the high schools, so that all these stakeholders truly knows what is the correct stock of knowledge that a student has when he or she graduates out of our school system. The industry wants to know truly, if they recruit a student out of year 13 with chemistry background, wanting to take in a pharmacy, they want to know the exact stock of knowledge a student has, not a disguised stock of knowledge through scaling. The labor market wants to know. The universities wants to know truly what is the true stock of knowledge that the student has. Initially, the university entrance mark was 200 out of 400 in the best 4 subjects, English plus best 3. When they found that the students were not performing, they raised it to 250. Again, they noted the students are not performing, those who were taking 250 and above. And last year, one vice chancellor came and met us and said, I think we will have our own entry exam. Now, if that step the university would have taken would have been a disastrous step, because it would have been reflected badly on the Ministry of Education, that our exam mark is not giving the true indicator of the stock of knowledge of the student. And universities have lost confidence in our assessment system. Imagine that. And what would the students do? They go through the rigmarole, do the external exam, and then here again in January, the university wants them to sit for another exam in order to enter the university. University is not confident. And another university said, I think we will raise the mark further to 270. Now, there will be no end to it. They can keep on raising the mark, because the system that we had fixed the mean mark for year 13 and fixed the mean mark for year 12, which means lifted the distribution and moved it to the right hand side, immaterial of where the mean mark would be, and also tinkered with the distribution shape through specifying a standard deviation. So we decided that we need to overhaul the system. It worked well some time back when there was one pool of money for scholarship, and all students at that time were competing. When Form 7 was introduced, students will come out of Form 7 and enter into universities. And there was a one pool of money. All science and commerce students would compete for the pool of money. And because commerce was seen as easier, most of the scholarship would have gone to commerce students. And therefore, Ministry at that particular point in time decided to scale the mark so that science students' marks are raised and science students also get scholarships. But those days are gone. Now we have a separate pool of money for toppers, and in toppers, the science students will compete for science only. The commerce students won't be competing for science. Accounting students will be competing for accounting slot. The commerce students at the moment have 20 topper scholarships. This year we raised to 40 in the toppers. There's 20 allocated. Engineering, there's number of scholarships for engineering, which only students wanting to do engineering, science students will apply for. Commerce one, only commerce students will apply for. They won't be competing with science students. So there's no issue in terms of all students competing for the same block. Now it's all segregated. In addition to that, in TELS, as long as you get offer letter and as long as you get the current 250 mark, you will get a TELS offer. So no issue about you not being able to get just because your mark is low. So the basis and rationale for scaling was out. And secondly, the damage scaling is done because it guaranteed a mean pass rate of 54 in year 13, because that was the mean pass rate given on the scaling formula for the distribution. So immaterial of what the pass rate would be, it's guaranteed that you will have on an average 54% mean mark. So effectively what had happened was over time, the pass rate started to fall, but if you pick up the annual mark, you'll find a perfect correlation between the annual mark and the final exam mark. Always the annual mark is much, much lower than the final marks in the designated subjects. But in subjects like English, Urdu, Hindi, IT, the annual marks are always higher, and the final mark, external exam marks are always lower, because English, IT, Urdu, Hindi, these courses, the marks were scaled down. If a student came to you in January and said, "Madam, sir, my annual mark was 90 in English. I got 50 here. Can't be. I worked very hard. My final exam, I did everything well. I should have got 90. The student is correct, because the mark was scaled down, so that the mean mark for all the subjects comes to 54. We had last year Urdu 100% pass rate, but actual pass rate after scaling was about 54 something. So you can see how the true knowledge of the student was not depicted in the mark that was awarded through the scaling system. We decided to discontinue scaling so that our stakeholders get the true picture of the stock of knowledge the student has. The student wants to know where the student performance is, so that the student can prepare for the next level. Well, the teachers want to know how the students did. We want to know how the students and teachers have done. University wants to know whether the student is prepared correctly and ready to enter the university. The labor market wants to know whether the student is having that body of knowledge that is depicted in the mark. We also decided that to bring back exams so that students get focused and we all get the true picture of the stock of knowledge. Now what we have is a system where we also measure the performance of a teacher through the student. Indirectly, when the student is sitting for the exam, we also are evaluating how the teacher has done. Kind of a measure of the performance of the teacher in terms of measuring the performance of the student. So I've decided that we kind of relook at the teacher performance evaluation through student assessment, through your supervisor's assessment, as well as the pass rate. Someone yesterday was arguing this morning that how about students they don't like the teacher, they will give very low assessment. We do understand there can be some cases. It is for that reason the student component is only 20% weight. The supervisor assessment is 20%, whereas the pass rate is 60%. So what, as the principal mentioned, we are after an output, like a business. The bottom line is the net return, the profit. Our output, our core business is providing education. You take a student January, the student has certain stock of knowledge. In December, your duty is to expand that stock of knowledge. Every year, the student should have certain attributes. So what we intend to do is to measure that student's stock of knowledge, whether the student have gained that stock of knowledge. What is the assessment method? The only very objective assessment method is through exams. So what we intend to do is to measure the true stock of knowledge through exams. I do know that you had annual examinations prepared by teachers themselves. But the problem with that was that whichever teacher covered whatever amount of syllabus was covered in that particular exam paper, and therefore there's no uniformity. So we got now from year 6 to 13, all the exam papers are prepared by our CAS section and the able leadership of Tiko. We've revamped the section. We've got a lot of subject matter specialists with master's degree in the subject area. For example, if it is a senior education officer chemistry, the person must have BSc chemistry and master's in chemistry, not BSc in chemistry and MBA or development studies, etc. That used to be practice in some cases. We're quite serious in terms of building subject matter specialists, and these are the people who will be preparing exam papers. Unlike before, when school teachers were involved in preparing exam papers, and a number of cases where there were leakage of exam papers. So this is the approach we have taken, and we are targeting 100% pass rate. That's the target. Unlike what some people have said, that there's so much fear among the teachers that you want 100% pass rate. I said, look, you need to understand. That's the target that we are after. That's the target that we are after. It's not saying, hey, we're standing here with a whip and saying, get 100% pass rate. There are factors beyond your control, such as ability of the student. The students that you have now, sorry to say, most of the cases haven't been prepared well by the previous class teachers because there was no rigorous system of assessment of the teacher's performance. They've been pushed out. So you are endowed with students for the next 5 years. These students are not adequately prepared. And that is why you need to do extra work. And we do understand that. We also understand the disparity between schools in Maritime and Interior and the schools in urban area. You can't compare with schools like, Mohan Nehal or J. Narayan College or MGM. Some of these schools actually are screening students, taking the cream students and demonstrating that they can get 100% pass rate. I'm saying, to do these principles, go and teach in a school in Interior Island where there's no button on the wall that you switch the button, lights will come on, and demonstrate 100% pass rate, then come and tell us that you are a top-notch principal. Go and teach in Bunisea, go and teach in Didia, and then come and tell us that you are a top-notch principal. Otherwise, please, understand the disparity between the schools in outer islands and the struggle those teachers are making and those things that you're taking for granted here. So those factors will be taken into account when determining how you performed, how you have performed, how your school has performed, how your students have performed. And we in the ministry are mindful of these differences, and we are devoting a lot of resources to develop and bring up the quality of infrastructure in these schools so that in another 2 to 3 years' time, those schools will also have the same kind of resources, infrastructure that the urban schools have to a large extent. So, again, as I have said, I can't see any reason why there should be fear among teachers with respect to the target goal of 100% pass rate. Of course, we can't say that you target 90% or 80%. It would be silly of us to say that. That's the target. We want you to get every student to pass and acquire at least 50% knowledge. And I said to someone in Nandongo, there was a whiteboard, and I said, tell me, if you have 50 students in your class, all of them have got 50 out of 100, what is the pass rate? The pass rate is 100%. The distribution is a vertical line. There's no distribution. There's a vertical line at 50. That's a 100% pass rate. And I'm saying the goal is not that tall. If we are asking you that your student may not be able to understand or acquire 50% of the knowledge, at least try to get them to acquire 50% of the knowledge. So, again, a class, like any class, will be normally distributed and distorted and may have poor students, some very poor students. Let's see if you can push them up and shift the whole distribution beyond 50 to the right-hand side, and don't have anyone on the left-hand tail crossing below 50. That's the challenge. Of course, if you can't deliver it this year, try to deliver it next year. But let's not tinker with the benchmarks that we have. That's the benchmark. Now, we have a lot of issues. As I said, there's a resource inequality issue that we at the ministry are mindful of, and we're dealing with that. As you know, we have changed the grant formula so that the smaller schools on the outer islands in interior are able to get more grant to deal with the fixed costs that you have here. The larger schools have. We are also looking at pushing more qualified teachers to the outer islands and interior. We're looking at investing on quotas so that teachers are able to go and stay there. Unlike in town areas where you can just get a place to rent, you don't have place to rent in the interior and in the islands. So we are looking at allocating money. We have got some money, extra money, additional money that we have wired out of different line items. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing in terms of resources, and we understand, we acknowledge the limitations, and we admit, and we're saying to the teachers out there in the interior and rural areas and islands that we know those factors that are pulling you down, and we will account for those. We do also have issues with teachers who are not performing. 80% of you are excellent, doing an excellent job. Unfortunately, it's the 20% that is tarnishing your name, and we want to deal with this 20%. We get on a daily basis complaints from parents, from community leaders, and about the teachers who are actually shortchanging the children. We are saying, look, you need to understand that you are playing around with dreams of the children, dreams of the parents. Everyone has a dream. You had a dream. We don't want you to be party to destroying the dreams of the children. They have a future ahead. They're at a very early stage in the primary, high school. We want you to ensure that you do your part and contribute to them realizing their dream. We have managements to deal with. Just this morning, I wrote a briefing paper to the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance about how managements have abused the free education grant in this country. One faith-based group got 2.4 million last year, took away 742,000 from that, which should have gone to the schools. About 20% of managements in this country have abused the free education grant last year. We are auditing the accounts. Now, we're going to take them on. We're not going to deal with them like we used to do last year. That money was supposed to be for teachers and children, to improve the students' learning environment, to improve the school's learning environment. But these people, this management, have abused this money. And that is why you would have seen some of the decisions we have made with regard to management. Those schools who have abused this money, which belong to teachers and students, we're no longer going to give them the money. We will manage it from the headquarters. We have got about 9, we're in the process of recruiting 9 more finance assistants. Each finance assistant will be given a list of schools. That's their full-time job to work with the school head, the principal or head teacher. We will give the principal and head teacher petty cash money for the month. In addition to that, we will get on a weekly basis their requirements, the stationery, etc. We will pay directly to the vendors, and we will pay the salary of the auxiliary staff, and that's how we will manage it. We have no problem with that. We gave the money, we trusted them, but they broke our trust. They abused the money. They reneged on the confidence we gave on them to look after the children in the school. We are working very hard in terms of empowering our teachers. We, as you know, we have got a person hired full-time who is running short courses in OHS and first aid, free for all teachers. We also are running counseling sessions for teachers so that all of them have basic counseling skills. Unfortunately, unlike 20, 30 years ago, our children are confronted with numerous challenges. 20, 30 years ago, we were not exposed to movies. We were not exposed to internet. There was no Facebook or texting or messages or that kind of colorful nude photos in the Fiji sun left out. We were shielded. Now our children are battling with these social issues, the influx of unfettered, unchecked information on social media and internet, and we have to look after our children, we have to protect them. And one thing we have done is we have revamped our NASAC section. It has broadened to not only look at substance abuse, but also talking to our students, counseling them. We are also broadened it. We have hired close to 50 retired teachers. Retired teachers because they've got a lot of wisdom and they can talk to students, counsel them, and gain confidence of the students. We are also working with faith-based groups to involve them in the counseling session. And we're quite worried about the kind of issues that have been brought to us. Just yesterday, a student in Lautoka committed suicide, one of our students in high school. We are very worried about this what's happening actually. We're also concerned about student discipline. While we are hard on our teachers, we also don't want our students to intimidate our teachers. So there's a lot of things that we are confronting now, and we are planning. We're planning to deal with them and work with all stakeholders to ensure that we don't lose our children. We have an output to deliver. Someone asked me some time back that, what do you do with these children who are engaging in that game? I said, we will talk to them, we will counsel them. He said, you're not going to discipline and suspend or terminate. I said, look, that is not the outcome we are after. You need to understand that the outcome we are after is to graduate our children with the stock of knowledge after every year. That's the outcome we are after, and that's what we want to deliver. And suspending and terminating students is not the outcome, intended outcome. And I must say that, with the cooperation of school heads, we were able to kill that particular game that spiraled up in our school system. And very quickly we just finished it off. And that's the kind of how we want to work using our system, the school system, education system we have. And we were one of the countries which tackled the issue very fast. Again, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, education is on the number one agenda of the government. Our Prime Minister has said that this is number one priority. This year, the government allocated for this year 401 million for the Ministry of Education, 8.6% higher than last year. Another 85.7 million for the higher education institutions. That takes the total budget to 14.6% of the entire government budget. Highest ever in this country allocated to Ministry of Education. Highest ever as a percent of total budget for any developing countries in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, and the small size African. That kind of budgetary allocation to a ministry where the output is not visible immediately demonstrates government's commitment to education and building a knowledge-based society. We do hope that you understand the importance that government is placing on education. You are our people on the ground. We depend on you. We are policy makers. I am a temporary person. You are a permanent person. I am a political appointment. The ministry belongs to you all. And we do hope that you realize the importance of your role in delivering the quality of education that we want to. Our aim is our students should get our product should be second to none. We don't want our student to go to Australia and New Zealand and someone say that we don't recognize your qualification, or you need to do something else to enter the labour market or the university. That's our game plan in terms of raising the quality. And we are very particular about that, and I think we can get there. There are some major stakeholders coming over to support us. There's a major announcement that we will be making later this year about ICT and digital literacy. And there's some more changes that we also want to make in the education system. I do understand a lot of you are working very hard, taking evening classes in this term and Saturday classes. We are really looking at how we change our term system so that you don't have to teach anything more than after 3:30 or Saturdays. You can have that for your family and leisure time. So we will be consulting you all once we converge on having 4 terms. We will then come and talk to you without affecting your holiday, the 7 weeks holiday you have. We don't want to affect that. But look, we'll talk to you. But at the end, you should not lose the 7 weeks holiday. That will be intact. But it may be better for you to give up the 1 week out of the 2 weeks you have and have peaceful evening after 3:30 and Saturdays. You'll end up saving more through just 2 weeks giving up. But that's something that, we'll consult you, all the heads of schools, and you can talk to your teachers as well. We also want to make maths compulsory. That's again something that we're discussing. We also want to, in English course subject, we have all kinds of novels and drama books. Some of them actually, have been written somewhere outside. We have our own novelists. So we want to streamline that as well. So some of these changes are coming that we will talk to you as well where relevant, and we'll take your input. So with this, I want to assure you that there's nothing to fear. If your pass rate is 50%, that doesn't mean you'll lose your job next year. No, it's not something that you measure your performance over 1 year. It's a 3-year thing. And if you consistently see your performance going down over a 3-year period, then that might demonstrate to us that you really are not meant for the classroom. We in the ministry, we have got a lot of jobs in the ERC, stapling and photocopying, HR section, so that's something, an option. Look, everyone have got a niche. Some people, for some reason, ended up with B.Ed education or B.Ed primary, secondary, whatever, but they really may not be meant to be in the classroom. So we can test it out where you are meant for. In fact, maybe not meant for the whole Ministry of Education. It's something that we can mutually discuss, over time. But I can assure you that you're part of a team that is there to deliver a dream that we all have. I think you will realize later on that you're here in this particular time to raise the bar of education. What our predecessors have done, excellent. We want to raise the bar.